Well, hello, all you lovelies. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa. And I hope you had a fabulous weekend. Happy Monday. And as always, I'm so happy to have you with me, Brice. How are you?
I am so good. I'm so excited about we've got some juicy stuff to talk about today, you guys. So I'm really excited.
You know, we love the juice. We love that juice.
We're gonna, and it gives me a little bit of insight because we're at the end of the Romanovs, you guys. But this is gonna take a couple episodes because we really got to understand like every spinning wheel that was happening when the Bolshevik Revolution happened and the mindset of Nicholas II and his ditzy wife, how they got so sucked into Rasputin, which again, taking a full circle back to old Rasputin. You know, Rasputin has gotten way more popular on this channel, Chantelle, than I think he was when he was running around.
Even when he was alive, yeah.
We brought life back into that pickled penis. We've brought life back into that.
Oh God, no, please. No, we don't want life in that. We don't want life in that willy.
So
once was enough.
Once was enough. You already, and we know from the law of one, the Cassiopeans, Rasputin is an affordancy negative planet, which meant that he went service to self, means that he had a soul and he opted to go to completely service to self with his abilities. So when we look at what happened, and I've been saying this, and I'll say this until I'm blue in the face, the academic reason why we study history, not for gossip, even though we know that's really why we study history is for gossip, but the academic reason why we study history is so that we don't repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again, which, let's be honest, we always do.
I was going to say, I'm sorry, girl. I'm so sorry, but we are
all the time.
It's like a loop, right? It's like a loop.
Dark loop, yeah. And my thing, if I can contribute anything to this timeline, I want to like hit the brakes on this quote unquote truther community for a hot second, because this is literally the Bolshevik Revolution playing itself out again. Not even 100 years later, like a little bit over 100 years later is playing itself. I mean, this isn't even ancient history, guys. This happened like when your great grandpa was alive. Like, this is not even that long ago. And we're seeing, and so we're going to start today off. It's going to take us a few episodes to get through like everything that was going on, because we know when things happen, there's all this stuff. Like, think about your own life. I was just telling Shanti, I just filmed a little video for my channel for later today about the show on Netflix, Baby Reindeer, which is a great show based on a true story, where it shows like the human condition, like how we end up getting ourselves into situations, and they always say never judge somebody unless you're in their shoes, because you don't know what you would do in a particular situation. But Baby Reindeer, that show, kind of like what we're going to talk about today, we're going to get to see some of what was happening leading up to the Bolshevik Revolution, because it was like the perfect storm. And one thing that happened, we're going to talk about today. We're going to start this off today. You guys remember back a few episodes ago when we spoke about Paul, Emperor Paul, who was, hold on one second, dad, grandfather, great-grandfather, who was Nicholas II's great-great-grandfather. He was the son of Catherine the Great. So Catherine the Great was Nicholas II's great-great-great-grandmother. And Paul, I had a lot of empathy for Paul, because he obviously was a massively abused child. He was not an emperor for very long. He was obsessed with the Knights of Malta. That was a very, very interesting historical person. I have a lot of, even though I'm sure he did some pretty shady things himself, I do have empathy for him, because I felt like he was set up to want to crave things like the Knights of Malta just to feel a family. But anyway, you guys remember with Paul, when Paul was assassinated, he had gone to this Russian prophet, the Nostradamus of Russia, who was a prophet by the name of Abel of Valam. He was
Abel of where?
Valam, V-A-L-A-M, Valam. Yeah.
There he is.
There he is.
He even looks like Nostradamus.
Yes. Now, we've talked about Nostradamus a while ago, Shanti. I don't even know if it was on this channel or the first channel you had before it was struck. Because Nostradamus was like besties with Catherine de Medici. Catherine de Medici was the woman gossip, y'all. Now this is gossip. Who used to put cow poo in her hoo-ha to attract her husband. Like, she was the last to talk about.
I mean, what are we even dealing with it? These not humans. What is he? Was he like a horny bull or something? I mean,
well,
like,
he
literally.
didn't like her. She was trying to attract him because they were married for a long time before they even popped out a kid. Because I mean, listen.
Well, are you even surprised the man was running a million miles from her?
Ladies, for any man I'm taken right now, but if there is a man out there I have yet to meet that I will be intimate with, let me just assure you this: you will never find cow dung in my hoo-ha. That's not going to happen. I think that's a repellent. That's a repellent to me.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm actually very clean. That's gross. But so we see these prophets, these big prophets, kind of working with these royals in a lot of senses. And we know, and again, you guys, like, I don't actually believe in the term prophet. I think there are psychics. I think we're all prophets. I think prophet is a little bit too big of a word to put on a singular person, because that implies a pecking order and implies there are people that are more or blessed by God than others. And that is simply not true. We all have a divine connection to God, but there are people that do have, for whatever reason, they do have the ability to see into the future. And from what I understand now, I know there's a lot of debate between Nostradamus, that even looking at some of his prophecies will say, people can say, well, that could be anything. You know, he's very vague in a lot of his prophecies. So, maybe that's the same with Abel as well. We're going to talk about it. But you guys remember, Abel kept getting himself in trouble with the Russian government back when Catherine the Great was alive, Paul's mother, because he would do things like prophesize Catherine the Great's death. And when it comes to royal courts, that's considered treason. Like, you can't say that a king or a queen is going to die. Like, back then, especially, it was. So he kept getting himself arrested for being like, yeah, she's going to die. And so when Paul was the emperor, he requested to see Abel a lot while Abel was imprisoned. So he would get information from Abel. And Abel, basically, he had a run-in with Abel before he was even. So let's back up a little bit before we get into Nicholas, because y'all remember Paul wrote a letter to his descendants 100 years down the line. So Paul died on March 12th, 1801. The letter was not to be opened until March 12th, 1901. So this is how we're going to start, because guess who the descendant was who opened the damn letter? The last Tsar of Russia, Tsar Nicholas II. And there was a lot in that letter. And we're going to start these next few episodes really starting with this, because this is so freaking woo-woo. This is such a weirdo thing to do. Like, I would totally be that person that was like, my ancestor wrote a letter from a prophet, that's psychic. I totally want to open that. Like, I would totally be down for that. Like, I'd be excited about it. So we have to kind of start there, because that, to me, I was so curious when we first started talking about that letter, what that letter said, and now we know. All right, so let's back up just a little bit, because obviously when Nicholas II is born and opens this letter, obviously both Paul and Abel are no longer alive, right? So the culprits are not alive. They're long gone. So Abel, who was born a man named Basil Vasiliev, was born in 1757. He became a monk of the Russian Orthodox Church at the age of 28. He spent a year in isolation in the forest. He learned to communicate with the spirits to predict the future, a bit like Rasputin. Rasputin did the same thing. If you guys remember back from our last episode of 2023, Rasputin went and hung out in the forest. Listen, if you're going to hang out in the forest for a long time, you better have you some ayahuasca and some magic mushrooms if you want to hear those spirits start talking to you. Because I have a feeling they weren't just alone in that forest. I have a feeling they were eating some magic mushrooms or taking some psychedelics. That's my if you have not had any type of spiritual awakening and you just go to the forest for a year, to camp for a year, and all of a sudden you're talking to the tree spirits, you probably took some ayahuasca. All right. Some of us who have seen spirits our whole life, we've been seeing spirits our whole life. We don't need that. But I'm just telling you, I'm thinking Abel was doing something else too. But that's just my opinion. So that's when Abel was born. So by 1782, this is the first time we hear Paul mention Abel. So Paul had obviously been kind of obsessed with this man. Listen, y'all, here's some hot gossip. If you don't like your mama, if you think your mama is like a 2-bit hussy because of all her lovers, and you don't like any of your mama's boyfriends that she's sleeping with as the emperor of Russia, and you know that there's a prophet that has prophesied your mama's death, you're probably going to want to have a friendship with that prophet, right? So in my petty little mind, I'm like, oh yeah, Paul really sought out Abel because Abel was prophesizing his mama's death and Paul could not stand his mama. So that's your juicy gossip for the day. So in 1782, so this is while Catherine the Great was still on the throne, Paul and his wife spent time traveling Europe. While in Brussels, Paul told a friend that he knew he was going to die early. When the friend asked him how he knew this, he repeated the words spoken to him by Abel many years before. So this is the direct words that I wrote it down that Abel had told Paul. So Paul already knew he was going to die early. Who am I, poor Paul? I am the one who takes part in your destiny and who wants you to be especially unattached to this world, for you will not stay in it for long. Live according to the laws of justice, and your end will be peaceful. Fear the reproach of conscience. For a noble soul, there is no more sensitive a punishment. So now people do speculate that maybe Paul manifested his own early death because of these words. I don't know. That's up to interpretation. But I do, but Paul kind of knew that Abel was like, you're not going to be in this world for long, Paul. And of course, Paul the first wants to be murdered on March 12th, one at 46 years old. So let's go ahead and just review. So from Paul the First, his oldest son, Alexander the First, became Tsar after Paul. Alexander the First, we did do a deep dive into because I think he faked his death and became a monk. And he didn't have any sons, so he passed the throne to Nicholas, his little brother, Nicholas the First. So Nicholas the First was also Paul's son. Nicholas the First then passed the throne to Alexander the Second, his first son. Alexander the Second was the person who freed the serfs and got assassinated by his legs being blown off by these revolutionaries who were building up against the Romanovs. And then Alexander II passed his throne to his son, Alexander III, who died young of kidney failure. And Alexander III passed his his throne to his son, Nicholas II. So Paul is Nicholas's great-great-grandfather. Nicholas I is Paul's great-grandfather. Nicholas II is Nicholas's grandfather, and Alexander III is his father. So Nicholas, you guys, just to give you a little background on Nicholas as we get into the fall of the Romanovs. So Nicholas II was born Nikolai Alexandrovich Romanov on May 18th of 1868. But actually it was May 6th, according to their calendar switched, which is going to be important. So in the calendar they had at the time, it was May 18th. But when they switch calendars, it becomes May 6th, which is very important to the prophecy. So just remember that. So when Nicholas was born, his grandfather, Alexander II, was the Tsar at the time. He was also Nicholas's godfather. Now, Alexander II would go on to be assassinated, have his legs blown off, that whole disastrous assassination, when Nicholas was 13 years old. And Nicholas witnessed him get assassinated. He witnessed it. So think about that. Your Peepaw, your granddaddy, who's also your godfather, who's also the Tsar of Russia at the time. You're 13 years old, and you see that happen to him. You don't only see them get killed, but you see him get killed in like the most brutal of ways. Like that has to impact you deeply. And that's something that's really strange to me about royalty too, which often gets me. Like when we're looking at passing down the throne or the crown, you're not going to inherit the crown until your father dies. So in order for you to fulfill your destiny, your dad has to die. In order for you to pass the throne to your son, because in Russia now, because of what happened with Catherine the Great, they've got a very strict rule that only males can inherit now. Females cannot inherit, right? So you now, as the Tsar, know that you're never going to see your son succeed to the throne. Because in order for your son to succeed to the throne, you have to die. Which to me is crazy. Like, to not see your children to their full potential of whatever they're destined to be, you actually have to die. Like, that's a pretty sick system, right? So he sees his grandfather go through this horrific assassination. At the same time, his grandfather is pronounced dead. They now have to change loyalty to his father, who's now the Tsar, Alexander III, right? Now, I also want to point out too, because this is going to come into later on as well. His mother, Nicholas II's mother's sister, was married to King Edward VII of the United Kingdom. So King George V was Nicholas II's first cousin, and they looked identical. This is going to be important. This is going to come into play when they are needing help, when they know that there's an there's plots against their lives. And I'll just spoil alert: the British, his cousins, wouldn't help it. They sought, when the Romanovs knew that there were plots against their life, they sought help from their cousins. His literal first, George V was Queen Elizabeth's grandfather. So you're seeking help from your cousin. So let's just take politics out of it, and you need help from your family. This is your cousin who's on the throne you're on the throne of Russia. Your cousin's on the throne of England. You're looking for asylum. You need to seek asylum into the United Kingdom because they're going to kill you. And your cousin says no.
That's crazy. You know, you were actually mentioning just a little while ago, which is something that I've been thinking about when you brought it up. When his legs got blown off and stuff like that in his assassination. I mean, isn't it crazy how many of these royals, it doesn't matter which country or which family or whatever. I mean, if you go back into history, they have lived the most brutal lives.
Brutal.
There is so much brutality in the royal families. And as you say, I mean, you were there already. So Queen Elizabeth's grandfather already taking the throne of Britain yonks ago, now connected to the So they've all kind of...
They're very connected because remember, Alex, his wife, is Queen Victoria's granddaughter.
Yes, exactly. So they've ages ago already infiltrated themselves into all the royal families of all the different continents and countries so that they can have allies, right? Yep. And that they do have sort of some kind of clout in different countries. But yet, I mean, for me, they've been doing that since the beginning of time. They've been marrying or having arranged marriages with daughters and sons and what have you. I guess that's to prevent inbreeding as much as they can, but it doesn't help too much because we've got a lot of slurpy foreheads and Habsburg chins. You know. Yeah. But I mean, and there's no loyalty there, right? And they have had such brutal lives. They really have it.
I can't imagine, because you go back and I think we'll talk. I wanted to kind of give that preface because we'll talk about that more too when we get to the point of the assassination. But I can't imagine calling my cousins. You know, your first cousins are literally like your siblings. Like they're only separate. You know, like they're kind of like your pseudo siblings. I know, like in a lot of them marry their first cousins, but it's against the law now to marry. You're too closely related genetically, right? So I can imagine calling one of my first cousins and being like, I need help. Can I come stay with you? And them saying no. If you guys watch The Crown, that series on Netflix that went through Queen Elizabeth's life, they flash back to the actual time because we're going to get to the identification of the bodies on that last episode when they use some of the royal DNA to identify them because they're so closely related, right? And so they start off. They start off the scene where it's King George V is on the throne, and they get communication from Russia, and they're like, "Sir, your cousins need help. Like they're going to be killed if you don't. They need somewhere to go. Can they?" And you see him kind of sit there, and all of a sudden he just says, no. And that brutality, you're right. Like to not, I'm not, again, we're covering this because the Romanovs were disgusting human beings as well. They were not great people. But as a whole, generally speaking, but when we look at individuals, you can't judge an individual by their you have to judge individuals individually. And I actually do have a lot of empathy for Nicholas II, because there's nothing to say that he ever hurt anyone. I haven't stumbled upon that. Like, we saw signs with Paul. We definitely saw signs with Paul that he had been abused. I do believe that Rasputin, if you go to our last episode of 2023, I absolutely believe that Rasputin was molesting those girls, his daughters. I don't know if he knew that, though. What did he know? I don't know. But I cannot imagine being a father of 5 children. You've already abdicated, which we're going to get to. We're not going to get to the abdication yet today. You know what's in this letter, which we're going to get to. And then you call your cousin for help, and your cousin says no. You've already seen your grandfather's legs get blown off. Like, I cannot imagine the stress that man was under. I can't imagine it. But but I wanted to kind of point that out to you guys, that this fall of the Romanovs, there's so many spinning wheels at play. And yeah. All right. So when his grandfather was assassinated, that was in March of 1881. He was 13 years old. In 1884, at 16 years old, he had a coming-of-age ceremony and swore loyalty to his father. I don't know what that coming-of-age ceremony is all about. It could have just been like a dinner. I don't know. They didn't give much details of what that was. The same year, in 1984, at 16 years old, he goes to his uncle's wedding, and he meets 12-year-old Princess Alex, the bride's youngest sister. So his uncle marries Alex's older sister. Now, remember, she's from Germany, his wife, the one that really gets into Rasputin. She is the granddaughter of Queen Victoria. So again, I'm telling you, this sect of the Romanovs, very closely related to the English monarchy. Okay. In 1986, 18-year-old Princess Alex, comes to Russia to visit her sister and falls in love with Nicholas, or Nicky as they called him. And I will say, out of all, and I think we talked about this with the Rasputin episode as well, out of all these marriages in the UK, in the Romanovs, in the monarchy, in all the monarchies, we see a lot of arranged marriages. But Alex and Nicky, the last Tsar and Tsarina of Russia, truly loved each other. Like, I don't doubt. They were a love marriage. In fact, Nicholas's father, Alexander III, didn't particularly want his son to marry Alex of Hesse. He had other women in mind for him. But when Alexander III knew he was dying of kidney failure, he approved the marriage just to get him married, because he was going to have to be the Tsar and he was going to have babies, right? So that is not who his family wanted for him, but they truly did love each other. And in fact, there's a cute little, they were kind of like, they were a little debaucherous. They would take their rings, their diamond rings that they had as royal, and they would carve each other's names into the palace. And I think you could probably still see their names, like little graffiti for little kids in love. And he gave her, there was a brooch that he had given Alex with a bunch of diamonds on it. And after they were killed, it was still found on her body. So this brooch that Nicholas gave her when they were kids and they were first falling in love, she wore even in her own execution. She had that brooch on. So that's sweet. That's very human. So in 1894, Nicky and Alex are engaged. A month after Alex, this is going to get, let me not make this confusing. In 1894, Nicholas and Alexandra, we'll just call her Alexandra because there's so many Alexanders. So in 1894, Nicholas and Alexandra are engaged. A month after Alexander III dies, they are married. May 14th, 1896, they are crowned Tsar and Tsarina. So let's go through this, you guys, because we're going to see a lot of the same conspiracy theories back then, after their wedding, that we see now in the truther community. So just keep your ears open. Halt the brakes for a second on all this junk conspiracy and realize that this shit's been done before, okay? Are we on the hamster wheel of junk conspiracy and the junk conspiracy cul-de-sac, right? All right, so they're crowned.
The continual loop.
The continual loop. I'm like, The cabal freak, y'all. The cabal loves the truther community because we are right where they want us to be. We are delusional. We think we're getting all this money. We think med beds are coming. This shit's been done before, you guys. Just wait. Just wait. It's been done before. All right. So May 14th, 1896, they're crowned the Tsar and Tsarina. They have a reception then that lasts 20 days where the nobility partied hard for 20 days to celebrate the new Tsar and Tsarina of Russia. Okay. May 18th, they have a reception, a day of reception for the commoners. The commoners are given gifts of food, beer, and y'all, a commemorative mug. A commemorative mug. How many people have commemorative mugs in the UK of William and Kate?
Did they even have things like that back then? That's hilarious.
Yeah, they had commemorative rugs for Princess Alexandra and Nicholas II. And okay, so all these conspiracies started. So remember, guys, during this time, way back in his great-granddaddy Nicholas I's life, remember the Decemberist revolt? We've already had, for almost 100 years now, we've had these revolutionaries growing in Russia, where they're sick and tired of the Romanovs. They're sick and tired of the opulent lifestyles. So these revolutionaries people are getting fed up, right? And so what does the cabal do? In my opinion, they start to puppet the truther community of Russia back in that time. Now they're puppeting both, yeah? So, all right. So guess what, y'all? If you don't laugh, you'll cry. Amongst a rumor started around Russia that if you went to the reception and you were given bread, food, and this commemorative cup, that meant that the Romanovs were going to gift you a free house and gift you gold. How many people today still believe that the government's going to show up at their front door with $1 million check? It's been done before. These conspiracies have been to calm the crowd down, to try to control the revolutionaries, subdue the revolutionaries. I've been saying this for 2 years now. How clever of the cabal to put out these conspiracies that you're going to get money in a house and don't worry, the white hats are in control. Wink, wink. It's all going to be taken care of to get you to relax and let the New World Order just walk right in the front door.
Well, you all can eat your hearts out because Brice has just donated $80, so I did get money.
That's amazing. Well, don't let I literally, I got my boyfriend and I were talking about this. My boyfriend used to follow David Wilcock for a while before. I think he's compromised now. But anyway, back in 2007, that was the first time that people started whispering about Nasara and that we were going to get money back in 2007. So we're almost at 20 years now of this promise in our timeline. Do you not? I hope people can see, no one's coming to save you. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Right? You got to do it yourself. That's truly waking up, is doing it, not waiting. So you want the same government that's corrupt. You want that same government to bring you a check. That's not, anyway. So I just thought that was so interesting. So when all these conspiracies started going around that if you went to this party for the commoners, for the peasants, and they gave you beer and commemorative cups and you were going to get a free house and gold coins, when these conspiracies started spreading, they only had enough gifts for about 400,000 people, but over 1 million showed up. So there wasn't enough gifts to go around. So there was a stampede on the gifts and over 1,000 people lost their lives. Okay. So,
sounds a bit like Black Friday.
Yep. Absolutely. No. It's puppeting people. It's just puppeting people. It's puppeting people. And of course, so this is all under control, I think, of the controllers anyway. So you've got, over here, you've got the revolutionaries thinking that they're going to get some prize from the government, like Nasara, like their version of Nasara. Then you got the Romanovs over here partying and living in opulence, and now people are stampeding and dying. So now there's even more tension because not only did they not get their house, and they literally all they got was meat, bread, and a commemorative cup. That was it. That was it. There was no house. There was no gold. The Romanovs didn't start that conspiracy theory. They were just going to give them gifts. So you've got all this tension now that's still building. So when over 1,000 people died, it took Nicholas II and his wife like 4 hours to get to the scene of the stampede, because the commoners, the people, thought that Nicholas and Alexandra were partying. But they actually were praying. They were actually in a chapel, but they were damned if they did, damned if they. There was so much tension at this point, it didn't matter, right? It didn't matter what they were really doing. So I just wanted to put that out there. Now let's go ahead and skip. Well, let's hold on before I get to the letter. So let me go ahead and just read you guys the order of the children. So Olga was the first daughter. She was born in 1895. Tatiana, second daughter, born in 1897. Maria, third daughter, born in 1899. Anastasia, fourth daughter, the one that's really going to be the focus of the big conspiracy we're going to look at, was born in 1901. So they had not had their son. Alexei would not come until 1904. Now, we talked about Alexei, the son, in our Rasputin episode. It was vitally important that they have a son so that Nicholas II would have an heir to the throne. Now, in my mind, Nicholas II also had a lot of brothers. So if all else fails and they only have daughters, then Nicholas II can just leave his crown to one of his brothers or his nephews. That's been done before in the Romanovs. We saw it with Alexander I to Nicholas I, right? So why was it so brutally, and why did it become so just brutally important to have a son, to the point where when they do have a son, Alexei, in 1904, he's so sick that they get caught up with Rasputin? I think I know why now, because I think of this letter that we're about to get into. I think they were trying to change the prophecy by having a son. Okay?
Right.
So 1901, it's time to open the letter. So March 12th, 1901, the emperor and the empress begin the day excited. They're going to see the letter. A servant said that after they went off to the location of the letter, they came back extremely upset and they would not talk about it. The servant said that Nicholas II kept mumbling about the year 1918, that he would have to get things changed by 1918, that he had a timeline. Now, he would be assassinated in 1917, so that's interesting. But let's go through the letter. This is what we know of the letter. So in the letter was written from Paul. Paul did not know who his descendants were going to be, but Nicholas II is his descendants. In this letter, Paul spoke about Abel, who Abel was, and that Abel had predicted the death of his mother, Catherine the Great, which is Nicholas's great-great-great-grandmother. Paul even wrote that Abel had predicted Paul's own murder. So the only prophecy that Paul knew had come true of Abel's was the prediction of Catherine's death, his mother's death. He wrote in the letter that his own murder was also predicted, but obviously writing the letter that had not happened yet. But now Nicholas II is reading this letter, and he does know that Paul, his great-great-grandfather, was assassinated. So now we start getting into stuff that Abel had predicted, that Paul is writing about, that Paul would have no way to know if these predictions came true or not. He talks about the burning of Moscow that happened after Paul was dead. He talks about the end of the Napoleonic Wars, which happened with Alex I, his son, so he had no way of knowing that. He talked about Nicholas I's reign, so Nicholas II's great-grandfather, and the Decembrist revolt, the revolutionaries that were going to start to rise up against the Romanovs. This is all predictions from Abel. He talked about the abolition of serfdom under Alexander II, who again is Nicholas II's grandfather. And he also talked about how Alexander II was going to have a brutal assassination, which Nicholas II had witnessed with his own two eyes. Now, again, Nicholas II is the one that's reading this letter. It's been sealed for 100 years. So can you imagine reading all this stuff about your family that was predicted 100 years earlier that has come true? And then we get to the last prediction. And this is specifically for Nicholas II. And this is specifically why Paul said it was to be opened in 100 years by his descendants, because he knew the person that was going to be on the throne 100 years from now. This was the person that Abel was talking about. So let me read you word for word what was written about Nicholas II in this letter. The holy Tsar, who is like Job the long-suffering. Now, remember how I said when they changed the calendar, his birthday became May 6th? Well, Job the long-suffering from the Bible, Job's feast day is May 6th. That's Nicholas II.
It's what day? Feast day.
His feast day is May 6th.
Is that a birthday?
No, I don't know. I'm not Catholic, so I don't know why they pick specific days for feast days, but apparently the feast day is May 6th for Job, the long-suffering. So the reference to Job the long-suffering is reference to May 6th, which is Nicholas II's birthday. Okay? So the holy Tsar, who is like Job the long-suffering. So the holy Tsar, who was born on May 6th, which is Nicholas II, will have the mind of Christ, the patience and purity of a dove, a crown of thorns we placed on the Tsar's crown. He shall be betrayed by his people, as was the Son of God. A great war will be fought. So we know we're going to get to the start right before he was assassinated. What war started? World War I. People will fly in the air like birds, airplanes, and swim underwater like fish, submarines. They shall destroy each other with stinking sulfur. Treason shall grow and multiply. In the eve of victory, the Tsar's throne shall fall. Blood and tears shall water the earth. A peasant with an axe will take power, and the plagues of Egypt will begin. Imagine reading that about yourself. And we know the rise of Lenin, Stalin, that whole Volkovich. We'll get into that when we look at the book. We're going to take an episode and just look at the Volkovich. A peasant with an axe will take the power. Right? That's the Volkovich Revolution. And this is being in 1901. So not only do you have confirmation that a lot of these things that Abel predicted that, oh, thank you, Thomas. Thomas, did you see that, Shanti?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Thomas.
You put on lipstick for good reasons.
I know, right? We put makeup on for a reason. We have great lighting. It's great lighting.
Yeah, ring lights work wonders.
Ring lights work. We should all walk around with a ring light in front of us all day. So thank you, Thomas. That's very kind. This is a very sad conversation. So thank you, boo. So I think, in my personal opinion, when people are put under duress, stress, and we've got this kid Nicholas who was born, like, saw his grandfather get his legs blown off, like, from the very beginning. We already know he knows about his great grandfather and the Decembrist revolt. You know, he knows all this stuff's going on. From all intents and purposes, what we know of Nicholas II's manner as well. He was very soft-spoken. Like, when they say he has the mind of Christ, Nicholas II was not intimidating. He just wasn't. Like, you look at his father, Alexander III, dude looked intimidating. Like, dude looked kind of scary. But Nicholas II looked kind of soft. I mean, he was a girl dad. Like, let's be real, he had 4 daughters. He was a girl dad. You know, I don't think Nicholas II really wanted to be the Tsar, nor did he have the continence to be the Tsar. I think he would have loved, like his great uncle Alex I, Alexander, he probably would have just loved to go live quietly in a small fishing village with his princess and just lived a quiet life. That's just my perception of him. But nonetheless, he's following the rules of the monarchy. He's gotten married. He's had 4 daughters now at this point. Anastasia was born in 1901, the year that they opened this letter. So he's got 4 daughters, no sons yet. In my mind, I think, and we know when we're under great stress, we're under great threats, we sometimes come to illogical conclusions. We become extremely superstitious. In my mind, if I was a czar,
paranoia and fear are horrific.
Paranoia,
actually, so you can imagine.
I think that the reason why they tried so hard for a son Well, so I feel like from mental gymnastics, trying to like do anything to derail the prophecy. I think when he read this, he only had daughters. And so it's for some reason in his mind, he thought the reason why this is going to come true is because I don't have an heir. Where meanwhile, all he could have done was just left the throne to his nephew, since they have to pass it to a man. He could have just, that's what his uncle did. Like, no big deal, right? You got brothers, you got sisters who have sons. Catherine the Great's husband, his great-great-great-grandfather, Peter the Third, was the nephew of the empress. Like, you can do that. Like, that's been done multiple times. But I think, this is just my speculation, I think that it became so important that they try for a boy because in some weird way, I think that Nicholas believed that if he had a son, it would break this prophecy, because then he would have a child to take the throne after him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Because we know that Alexis
totally makes sense. Paranoia, superstition, and no doubt they would have been sitting nattering their backsides off for hours and hours to figure out how to change this prophecy. That's not a very nice prophecy. I mean, let's face facts.
It's not.
All of us who've been to see a psychic before, or a fortune teller, whatever you want to call them, we know we only want like to hear the good stuff, right?
Yeah. Tell me about my great love affair that's coming and the $1 million business I'm going to open. Don't tell me I'm going to die at the hands of a.
And this is a good reason why we don't go and see this stuff, by the way.
So I'm going to read that again. I'm going to read that again to you guys, just so you guys hear it. The Holy Tsar, who is like Job, the long-suffering, with the mind of Christ, the patience and purity of a dove, a crown of thorns will replace his czar's crown. He shall be betrayed by his people, as was the Son of God. A great war will be fought. People will fly in the air like birds and swim underwater like fish. They shall destroy each other with stinking sulfur. Treason shall grow and multiply. In the eve of victory, the czar's throne shall fall. Blood and tears shall water the earth. A peasant with an axe will take the power, and the plagues of Egypt will begin. Now let's look at that. Blood and tears shall water the earth. Well, we know, it's not a spoiler alert, guys. We know how they were killed. They were shot to death. It was Nicholas, his wife, all 5 of their children, and a couple of servants were brought into the room. They were set up like they were going to take a picture of them, and they were read a death warrant. And they took their bodies and just dropped their bodies out to pasture. They've just recently, in modern times, have given the bodies a proper burial. So the blood and tears shall water the earth. That's the bodies of him and his children going into the earth after they were killed by the Bolshevik. So, yeah, that's not a great prophecy to read. And so, what do you do at this point? What do you do as Nicholas II? Do you, if nothing else that Abel had predicted had come true, then you could probably just laugh it off. But the fact that he predicted all these other things that came true, that he would have no way of knowing and died long before they actually happened. To see that about yourself, I think that's why, because Alexei came in 1904. And we'll talk a little bit in future episodes about Rasputin again, but I really urge you guys to go back to our episode we did, the last episode of 2023, to look at Rasputin, okay, and the relationship that Alex and Nicholas had with Rasputin. Because remember, Alexei, the son, who was born in 1904. So 3 years after they read the letter, they finally have a son. In their mind, they're probably hoping that this is going to break the curse. Well, what was wrong? Alexei had hemophilia. So hemophilia came from Princess Alex because it came from Queen Victoria. So Alexei is the great-grandson of Queen Victoria. So now we've got this child, this son that we think is going to save us all. Like, that's a lot of pressure to put on a baby boy. Not only are you going to be the czar one day, but you're also now, hopefully, you're the token
gonna
son.
Save Russia.
That's going to save Russia, save your sisters, save your father, save your mother from the blood and tears watering the earth, from the peasant with an axe going to take over the czar's throne. That's a lot of pressure to put on a baby boy. But he's also got hemophilia. which hemophilia can be it only shows up, it's called the royal disease because it's mostly coming, and I'm a descendant. Queen Victoria is my 5 times great grandmother. I mean, I'm a descendant of to decide, there's a lot of us out there that are descendants. I mean, Queen Victoria had a lot of grandchildren. Their grandchildren had mistresses. I mean, she's got a lot of great. But this is considered a royal disease because it only affects really aristocratic families or royal families, but it only shows up in males, really. And so, even though Princess Alex of Hesse carried the hemophilia, it didn't show up in her. It didn't show up in the daughters, but it showed up in Alexei. And so with hemophilia, especially this type, there's different types of hemophilia, but this type of hemophilia, it's like a blood disorder. So like, even if a normal kid will fall off a bike and scrape their knee, and you just kiss it better. But for Alexei, if he were to scrape his knee, he could bleed to death. So you've got this really sick child, this child that could lose his life at any minute, but you don't want people to know this. You got to keep this a secret. Why? Because you think Alexei's going to save your life, right? Otherwise, why not be like, well, my child's sick, we're doing the best we can, but I've got these nephews so that the throne is going to be safe within the Romanov family. No, I think it goes beyond that. I think it goes into the psychology of the stress that Nicholas and Princess Alex of Hesse were under. And so therefore, when we go back to the Rasputin stuff, because Rasputin, people do blame Rasputin for the fall of, for the building of the Bolshevik as well, that he had a lot to do with the manipulation, which we'll talk about again. I don't know. I wasn't there. You guys weren't there. All we can do is look at people's studies from that time and what other historians and politicians have said about the influence that he had. So you can see where Princess Alex, who read the letter as well, I doubt I would assume they probably did not tell the daughters about the letter or the son about the letter. So this is a secret, a stressful secret that both parents have. We've got this son. He's really sick. Many times he almost died from hemophilia. We don't want the public to know this. We want the public to see him as a healthy little boy that's going to be their future czar. So we want to give this impression of this happy, healthy little boy. We have the scene where we talked about in 2023, where Rasputin comes in and prays over Alexei. And I have no doubt that Rasputin had, I believe he did have gifts to do things. As we saw from the Law of One, the Cassiopeians, he was tapped into Atlantean stuff and he was using it. So remember, guys, the gift of healing, the gift of touch, this is all tools. It's the person doing it and their intention to do it is what makes it either polarized positive or negative. In Rasputin, we know polarized negative. So in my mind, he saved Alexei. So the mother and the father are relying on Alexei to stay alive to defeat the Bolshevik. Rasputin is using Alexei's sickness to whittle his way into the political power and the political elite of Russia to control these aristocratic people, to control the Tsar. So we've just got a shit show here of manipulation in every single corner, all instigated by fear, all instigated by stress.
Power. The love of power and the love of money. It's all about power, and I mean, really, if you look at, when you look at the Luciferian system, right, the things that they look for the most when they're targeting individuals to do their work, like the CIA and stuff like that, they look for the love of power, the love of money, and the love of sex or woman or whatever it might be. So it's interesting that, again, look at Catherine and her love of her furniture. Yeah. And the pickled wiener.
Yeah. It's opulent.
So it's really money and power would be, and that is the loop that we keep playing out.
Yeah. Because
again, when humans can transcend our fear of not having, because that's greed. Greed comes from a fear of not having, a fear of not having enough, not having money, not having a house, whatever. Really, at the end of the day, if we all just understood there's enough for everyone. And if we just accepted the fact that we can't drive 14 cars at the same time, having 10 houses really serves no purpose, you know. If we just understood that, you know, life would be so much easier, because really, again, as I say, the loop that we keep repeating in our hamster wheel world or Groundhog Day world is money, power, sex. Boom, simple as that.
You know, it's interesting. You wonder, like, with Nicholas II, if I had read that, if I was really worried, I probably, like, super worried, I probably would have just abdicated and passed the throne to my brother anyway and left the country. But we don't know what kind of mind was he craving that power. I don't know. What kind of mindset was he? And I love Carol's comment here. She said, I can never imagine deceiving people like we all have been deceived. Well, the thing is too, like this, you can't deceive someone. Like, you have to get people to a very vulnerable position in order to pull off some of these deceptions. And I think that's what's happened. And we see this, it's easier to see this historically because we're not emotionally attached to the story, right? Like Nicholas II.
Not that story anyway.
Yeah.
You know, Brice, what we're seeing here is really a micro in our own worlds. I mean, if we just look in our own families, right? Or in our own communities, but let's look within our family. We really are a microcosm of the macrocosm. Look at your inheritance. I mean, I have seen in my career as a healer, I have seen the worst kind of family feuds arise when it comes to time for inheritance. It might not even be a huge inheritance, right? But that's the money and the fear of not having. Because the fear of not having creates these kind of toxic behaviors. So it's like when we're looking again on a more global level, that's exactly what this entire Luciferian cult is built on. When you're looking at all of the people that have sold their kids, that have sold themselves, that have sold their friends out, that have betrayed people, what are they getting in return? Nothing. Are they just doing it because there's always a price? And that price has to do with money or power. You look at all the people in the Bilderberg 300. I mean, do you not think those guys mostly have private jets, drive around in super dashing cars, have at least 2 or 3 homes, whatever the case might be? They are bought with money, and that has been the ongoing thing. And this is where we absolutely, and yes, I'm not saying money is bad, right? We need money in the world we're living in.
Behind it, it's that and what's that Shakespearean line? All the tangled webs we weave, and first we practice to deceive. And so we look at, and like when Carol's saying here, I can never understand deceiving people like we've all been deceived. I think sometimes, again, in order for deception to work, you have to bring people into that fear state, right? You have to bring them. So that's that's something, you know, like
tap into their fears sure.
Tap into their fears in order to deceive them. And so, and again, we see this in the truther community. If I can use that as an example, people have, you know, they woke up a little bit and then they were brought into this state of like delusion because they were the cabal was able to come in and control the awake community because they were able to tap into that fear. They were able to tap into, you know, people's fear of death by making them believe a med bed was around the corner, you know, or a fear of like of not having money by assuring them Nassara was coming and the IRS was going to shut down, right? And so now what's happening though is because they were able to deceive people that way. Now we have people, especially in America, who have lost everything, waiting for this mysterious check to come in the mail, or have let their health completely go because they're waiting for that med bed. And so, you know, what do they ultimately want? They want us to own nothing and be happy. Well, what a great way to get people to own nothing is by getting them to bring themselves to that place of owning nothing, by getting in delusion, by thinking it's okay to not save money or not make money because the SAR is on its way. So now they're going to own nothing and they're going to have to be happy with whatever is given to them by the cabal. So it's quite brilliant, actually. If you're able to look at the way, I mean, I've said this before, the cabal is many things, but stupid ain't one of them. They're psychopaths. So their plan is brilliant.
Very clever, yeah.
They have
all
no
their
heart.
heart energy that's been shut off has gone into their brain power.
Exactly.
That's for sure.
They don't have empathy. They can't. They're laughing. I mean, I believe that the cabal, the Illuminati, I think they love the truther community. I think they love it because look what else happened. I mean, they are controlling the truther community. I mean, they are trolling the truthers more than they're controlling the normies at this point, right? And look what happened. All the censorship started happening. So all of a sudden, the people who were awake all ended up on one platform like Telegram. And so now their delusions can run wild on Telegram, and the cabal loves that. There's people like Shanti and me and our friend Catherine who are fighting to stay on the regular platforms like YouTube instead of being huddled into the corner with like-minded people, because we want to be able to talk to other people and have a greater conversation, if that makes sense. We don't want to get hooked into places where it's just festering within itself, if that makes sense. So I think it's, I mean, hit the brakes. Like, I just want to like scream this from the rooftops to all of the truthers. You're falling for it again. We've already fallen. The Russian people fell for this hardcore with the Bolshevik revolution in the Romanovs. Hardcore fell for it. And you're falling for it again. You're falling for it again. This is easy. This is like shooting fish in a barrel for the cabal. It's easy for them. We know they use the same playbook over and over and over again. Well, why change something if it ain't broke? It's working for them over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's what's important.
They know exactly how to tap into our fears.
Yep.
They know exactly how to elicit whatever it is they want. And it's like one of my guests the other day, Lynn Monet said, that energy is like chocolate. I mean, the way she said it was just so perfect. It's like chocolate for them.
Yeah.
So as long as we are not doing the work we need to do, remember, but also let's also just give ourselves a little bit of a hope here, because if you're going back 300 or 400 or 500 years ago, they didn't have the tools that we have now, right? We've also evolved. We as humanity has evolved quite a bit since then. We now understand the power of frequency, of energy. Your body's a resonance chamber. And it's like we can see ourselves, let's say, fighting in the swamp. Okay, that is not a comfortable thing. So while we're fighting with them in the swamp, we're easy targets for them. So as we raise our frequency, we can imagine that we are like a helicopter or a chopper just rising out of that. And that's what happens when you do the shadow work, when you realize you don't have to fear not having, because you have everything. You are enough. You always have been and you always will be. Yeah. And when you realize that you are created from a fragment of God, so in other words, you have the ability to perceive the world and create in the same way that God does. Maybe in a micro, you are not God. I want to just make that clear. You are created from the essence of God, which means you have the same energy that has created universes and multiverses, has created you. So when you tap into the power that is you, you will not need anything, because then you realize you are a masterful creator. You are a masterful manifester. And it's got nothing to do with new age thought. It's got to do with the most ancient aspect that is you. So when we tap into that and we realize there's nothing to feel guilty about, there's nothing to feel ashamed about, there's nothing to feel humiliated about, let those things be the power that catapults you into living your life's purpose. And when you get that, you are no longer susceptible to what's happening in the swamp.
Absolutely, 100%. That's the secret, right? The secret is to just take care of yourself, to find that. And I keep telling people, like, and I love it. Charmaine said, if it seems too good to be true, it is. Yeah, if it seems too good to be true, it is. There's no such thing.
I always talk about the devil's bling is just a little bit too shiny. I'll say it again. When you've seen real gold, like real gold that comes out of the earth, and I have, because I live in a country that mines gold and produces gold, right? It's almost like molten. It's almost like dull, but it's like beautiful. It's like, you know, and it's very heavy to lift up with your hand, right? But when you see it, you know it, you will recognize real gold versus fake gold. So don't go for the fake. Keep saying no to the fake shit. And then when the real, when the real deal appears, you will know the real deal when it appears in front of you.
Absolutely. So, and you are the real deal. Like, listen, my mama used to tell us all the time, if you allow the government to take care of you, you allow the government to control you. So what's the difference?
And they're not the real deal.
No. And what's the difference?
And only when you've understood the power that is you, will you recognize the real deal in front of you.
Yeah. So what's the difference between this government and America? We'll talk about, welfare system that gives money out in Nasara. It's still somebody controlling you. If you allow somebody to give you money, there's always going to be a catch. We see that with the Bolshevik Revolution. You're the privilege you have. You are privileged enough to be on this earth right now because you have the ability to save yourself. So why wouldn't you do it? Why would you rely on another dumbass human to save you? Like, no, you save yourself.
I like what you say, Thomas. Yeah, you come from source. You are a co-creator on a smaller scale. Absolutely. You co-create with God. When you realize you are created and you are created from this magnificent fragment of God's essence, if you will. I can't think of another word. I find different words all the time. Then you realize you are co-creating with God all the time, or the source, whatever you choose to call it, or your divine creator, or the divine. It's the same thing, just using a different word.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when we have that, we don't need to go and look for anything. Doesn't mean you don't feel fear, but then you understand fear, false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
You walk towards that fear and you conquer it. You don't run away from it, you walk towards it.
But my teacher in India says, why fearing? Why fearing? Why fearing? So, and I just realized, Shanti, I got to hop on another call soon. So next week, the Volkovich, let's talk about the Volkovich next week before we pick back up with Nicholas. So we understand both sides of the coin here in this situationship that we're in between the Romanovs and the revolutionaries.
Situationship.
We find ourselves in.
Exactly.
So
okay, guys. Well, Brice, you got a call to hop onto. I've got a show, or also a call to go get onto soon. So I want to say to you, thank you so much, everybody. As usual, love having you on our shows, and we will have you back on Wednesday. I'm not sure if it'll be because Solutions, as you guys know, has now been blocked for a week because I was a naughty girl and I dared to speak about frequency medicine and medical misinformation. So it means there's no misinformation there. Run off and go and buy yourself a Spooky 2 machine.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be the thing that really is the medicine of the future and of the present, actually. So God bless you all. Take good care of yourselves, and we shall see you on Wednesday. What are we talking about on Wednesday, Brice?
We got some bombshells in the freaking Chad Daybell. Like y'all. Okay, so little, and I'll hop off because I gotta go to another show. But listen, y'all, there's a show here in America called Jury Duty, and it's this like mockumentary where this guy thinks he's sitting on a real jury, and it's not a real jury. They're all actors, and it's a hysterical show if you can watch it. It's hysterical. And one of the reporters I've been following, because the jury can't know anything about the case before they send the case. She goes, I'm looking at this jury and they're talking about zombies, dark and light spirits. And I'm thinking, these people must think that they're on some like mockumentary at this point. They must be thinking, where are the hidden cameras? Like, this is not so.
They've been smoking hash.
I'm letting the trial unfold as it unfolds with Chad Daybell. We talked a lot about near-death experiences last week. I've got some awesome Mormons that I need to get into contact to because this does offer an even bigger look at the
wait for me behind the scenes. I have got a great one.
Okay, cool. I gotta hop off because I'll text you though because I gotta hop off.
Okay.
On the call. So
okay, guys, take care. All the best. We'll see you on Wednesday.
Bye, guys.